This audit course will help you pass stage 1 and stage 2 audits across quality management system, HSE, and food safety management system, because we will give you the complete checklist, all the records and recommendations you need to keep. We will show you the practices and compliance with regulations, and we'll also demonstrate with real-world scenario, and we will explain the concepts that might sound confusing. So this is a practical guidance, and you can use it as your reference whenever you have audit, or if you want to maintain operational excellence with completeness. And if you follow step by step, you will maintain zero finding across all the standards we've just mentioned. Part 1, we will start with quality management system. Then part 2, we will move to HSE, and part 4, we will move, and part 3, we will move to food safety management system. And in part 4, we will cover FSSC certification and also the integrated management system with complete checklist. And specifically, this course is covering retail and food service management system. Now, if you have an overview at the management system of ISO, we are applying ISO 9001, ISO 45001, ISO 14001, and ISO 22000 for to retail and food service operations. Those standards require organizations to align with local legislations and relevant health and safety and environmental management and food safety. So it's crucial to understand this from the beginning, that the standards don't require you to align only with international standards, but must be based on local legislation relevant to the standards, your local regulations guidance. And for FSSC requirements, FSSC 22000, specific requirements for retail and food service organizations are what we are going to cover today. And in this sector, compliance with national food safety programs and hygiene regulations is crucial for customer-facing operations. And we will demonstrate through real-world scenarios, navigating certification within live customer environments from receiving to service. We cover typical scenarios that are encountered, and you might be familiar with those scenarios later on during your operation in retail stores, supermarkets, and food service outlets. First, let's have a look of what a retail and food service organizations really is. In essence, retail and food service organizations globally handle food in front of customers. They operate under high staff turnover, intense time pressure during peak service periods, and also face behavioral risk at every customer interaction. Organizations in retail and food service sector are legally responsible, all right, for food safety outcomes while products are in their control and during service to customer. That's why auditors in this sector judge what happened when managers are not watching, what happened at night, what happened during the weekend, what happened when the managers are away. The auditors usually focus on those scenarios. The typical activities covered in this sector include receiving, storage, display and service, food preparation, and waste handling. And during receiving, you conduct supplier delivery acceptance and incoming inspection. That means the supplier acceptance criteria must be outlined and followed based on local regulations, and conduct the inspection and judge the outcome based on defined criteria to ensure compliance with food safety regulations and quality standards. And then during storage, you are required to maintain proper storage conditions for ambient products and chilled products and also frozen products. And you have to maintain based on national or international standards. And this is crucial also for product integrity and food safety of the product. And during display and service, product presentation and customer interactions, it requires operations to adhere to food hygiene and safety guidelines during peak trading hours and all the time. And then during food preparations, such as cooking, assembly, and finishing of food items where applicable, if it's applicable in your organizations, here you are required to maintain temperature control and hygiene standards throughout your operations. And for waste handling, the disposal of food waste and packaging and contaminated materials must be segregated and managed under relevant environmental and health and regulations in your country. So you must follow those regulations to segregate and manage and dispose according to the guidelines. If we look at risk at every stage from the mentioned activities, each activity introduces food safety, quality, workers' risk that is unique to customer-facing operations. So these risks and activities must be systematically controlled and monitored in line with global best practices and ISO standards. As failure here is public and immediate also. Let's have an overview for the key stakeholders and exposure in retail and food service industry. You have customers. Customers in this industry are directly exposed to food safety and service quality with immediate feedback through complaint and social media. And you know, the complaints and social media are also it makes you fragile to brand reputation and trust from the customers, which means you need to maintain high standards. The workers also are exposed to hazards in your operations, including cuts, burns, slips, manual handling, and repetitive strains. Safety here is governed by local health and safety legislations and approved code of practice, which you must follow thoroughly with documented approval or documented evidence. And then you have regulators. For your regulators, from your local council or your local legislations and authorities, the food safety is monitored during your operations for compliance. And it must comply with local food safety and occupational health and safety and environmental legislations. And sometimes they conduct unannounced inspections, which are common practices globally, and you must maintain compliance at all times. Then you have brand owners and franchisors are also stakeholders that are exposed. And for franchisors, operations particularly, and brand owners, have vested interest in consistency and compliance. Franchise agreements typically require adherence to brand standards and certification maintenance. And then for the communities surrounding your operations, local stakeholders are concerned with waste management and your energy use and your employment practices and environmental impact. Those must be complied with based on local regulations and community expectations. Accredited auditors or auditors from accredited bodies globally assess risk ownership across every stakeholder group. Workers or regulators or brand owners or franchisor or community or customers, they assess risk ownership. And your responsibility extends to every customer interaction and every shift. Let's have a look at the scope definition. For retail and food service organizations, your certification scope must clearly and accurately define all activities under your organization's control. Misalignment between the documented scope and actual operations is a frequent cause of stage 1 audit deferral in certifications contexts globally. So scope definition must be comprehensive, accurate, and clear. And it should include service types. You must explicitly state retail only, for example, or food preparations, or full service restaurants, or quick service, or catering, or combination of all. You must clearly and explicitly state your service types and clarify whether you cook, reheat, assemble, or only display pre-packed food. And also you need to include your preparation activities to clarify cooking operations, for example, versus reheating versus assembly only. And you need to include any on-site bakery, butchery, delicatessens, or appetizers, or prepared foods operations that fall under your control. And if you have multi-site operations also, you must include all outlets, kiosks, stores, or service points. And you need to clarify central kitchen versus individual site preparation and franchise versus corporate control structure. And finally, in your scope, you must justify the exclusion also. Any part that you exclude must be defendable and documented with clear rationale, particularly regarding activities performed but claimed as out of scope, such as cleaning or pest control, for example. The common failure in scope definition that you need to avoid here: food preparation is excluded from scope, while cooking or reheating activities remain under direct control. That is a common failure that you should avoid. Or there is a lack of clear documentation for multi-site operations and franchise arrangements. That also a common failure that you can avoid. And here an ideal scope statement that you can assess your current scope against and conduct any required improvement. Because a well-defined scope statement clearly describes what services your organizations provide, to whom, and under what conditions. So your scope statement must align with your actual operations and certification standards relevant to the local regulations environment. For this example scope statement, it starts as retail, sales, and food service operations providing fresh and prepared food to customers. Services include receipt, inspection, and storage of food products to ambient or chill between 0 to 5 degrees Celsius and frozen at minus 18 degrees Celsius temperatures. On-site food preparations including cooking, reheating, assembly, and finishing. Display and service of food products to customers during trading hours. Customer service and point of sale transactions. Waste handling and disposal. For exclusions, we have manufacturing or primary production activities, central distribution or logistics beyond receiving at retail locations, activities performed by subcontracted service providers such as cleaning, pest control, and maintenance are under suppliers management. Now let's look at what make this scope, the elements that make this scope statement strong. We have temperature range and storage type you actually operate. Those must be included in your statement, scope statement, and clear service boundaries such as retail versus preparation versus full service must be clarified, and geographic coverage and number of sites and outlets is also another element, and customer type served, walk-in retail or table service or takeaway or catering, and a specific exclusion to prevent misunderstanding and alignment with your operational capabilities and local food safety programs. Those are elements that will make your scope strong. So take a note of them and then compare your scope statement against those elements and include any part that might be missing. Now let's start with part 1, quality management system, ISO 9001. Defining quality in retail and food service. In retail and food service, quality is not just about product defects like in manufacturing. Here, it is fundamentally about delivering consistent and safe service. So failing on quality here erodes customer trust and jeopardizes revenue and risk compliance with regulatory bodies. Your quality definitions must include safe food every time, must confirm that, which means you need to maintain temperature control throughout the service and preventing cross-contaminations at every step and managing allergen accurately and consistently. That's the meaning of food safety every time. Also, your quality definition must have consistent service being included. Consistent service means same quality across all shifts and all outlets, and standardized preparations and presentations, and predictable customer experience regardless of the staff who are working at that time. Which means you have to have SOPs, KPIs, awareness, induction, visible leadership, all that to ensure consistent service. And your quality must also include accurate information being managed. That means accurate allergen declaration on menus and labels, honest products description and pricing, clear communication about ingredients, and preparation methods. That's why having defined criteria for acceptance of deliveries, suppliers assessment, and in-house training, and following the local legislations and regulations are requirements to have accurate information, because when the product and service are under your control, you have full legal responsibility. And then we have customer trust. That is something also you must be striving to in your quality management system, including clear and hygienic environment that must be visible to customers, and professional staff behavior and appearance, and rapid and transparent response to complaints and concerns. Here, the role of awareness and leadership also and competence are paramount. And your quality must strive for accurate documentation as well, including temperature monitoring records for regulatory compliance, traceability for recall capabilities, clear audit trail for internal and external inspection. And here, as regulators will visit you unannounced and conduct monitoring or check the records or conduct inspection or even pick up a product and conduct rapid traceability, you need to have accurate documentation all the time. Now let's have a look at class 4 and 6, context and leadership. Understanding your service context means knowing customer expectations, peak service pressures, regulatory obligations, and behavioral constraints. So leadership here must be visible on the floor during service and not confined to offices. To meet customer expectations, you need to have clear understanding of food safety expectations, service quality standards, and allergen management requirements are critical to customer-facing operations. For operational leaderships, your leaders must be present during peak service periods, must be engaged in real-time decisions and addressing issues as they arise on the floor. And for shift accountability, you must maintain the accountability across all shifts, including evening, weekend, and peak trading periods when managers may not be present. Failure patterns here that we need to avoid in the context of leadership. Policies sometimes exist, but supervisors do not enforce them during busy periods. That's a common failure. And leadership absent when problems occur during peak service times. We have to ensure that those failure patterns are eliminated by making sure leadership presence and also awareness and competence being ensured. Let's look at ideal quality policy that also you should assess your existing quality policy against and conduct any required improvement. A quality policy must be more than just a generic statement. It should reflect actual business priorities. It should demonstrate leadership commitment. And your policy must guide daily decision making in customer facing operations. And it should also help on organizations to meet its ISO 9001 certification requirements. This is an example of a quality policy that you may replicate or take it as an example or a reference to review yours. It starts as at, then you insert your company name. We are committed to provide safe, high quality food and excellent customer service in every interaction at every location. Our commitments to maintain strict food safety standards throughout receiving, storage, preparation, display, and service, aligning with international best practices. To comply with all applicable food safety, health and safety, and environmental regulations in every jurisdiction where we operate, provide accurate allergen and product information to customers, enabling informed decisions and protecting vulnerable consumers. Invest in our people through comprehensive training, creating a culture where every team member takes ownership of food safety and quality. Continuously improve our systems through customer feedback, data analysis, and operational reviews, maintaining our commitment to ISO standard requirements. Minimize our environmental impact through waste reduction, energy efficiency, and responsible sourcing, contributing positively to sustainability goals globally. Every team member is responsible for quality, safety, and customer satisfaction. Management provides the resources, training, and support needed to achieve these commitments. This policy is reviewed annually and communicated to all staff, contractors, and relevant stakeholders. And then also, it must be signed and dated by the top management and communicated everywhere. Let's look at elements that make this policy strong. It is specific to retail and food service operations, such as food safety throughout service, customer interaction, and allergen management are indicators. And it addresses all relevant management systems, including quality, food safety, health and safety, and environmental, including compliance with local legislation. It includes measurable commitments such as food safety standards, regulatory compliance, and accurate information. It assigns clear responsibilities to both management and staff, reflecting a robust organizational structure. And it commits to improvement and review, aligning with ISO standards audit practices relevant to businesses worldwide. And it's written in plain language that operations staff can understand and apply it in various regulations. Those are the elements that make this policy strong. And again, you can assess yours for improvement against those elements. Now let's have an overview for Class 6, risk-based planning. Risk-based planning in retail and food service demands anticipating and preparing for operational disruptions in accordance with relevant local food safety and occupational health and safety regulations. Controls must be documented, regularly practiced, and embedded into daily operations. If we look at a high staff turnover, risk of inconsistent training and knowledge gaps is a result. All right? Inconsistent training and knowledge gap. New staff making critical food safety errors. So control here must survive rapid staff change and minimal training time. All right? During the induction, staff awareness, body system, mentoring, and simplification of the processes are among elements that will make you place a control to survive the rapid change and ensure freedom from critical food safety errors. And then you have peak service pressure is another characteristics of this industry. Corners cut during rush period and temperature abuse when kitchens are overwhelmed and cross-contamination when staff are rushed. So your controls here must work under pressure and not just during quiet periods. And definitely we have other courses in our YouTube channel that address those points and go in depth of how to design the system. Another characteristic of this industry is supplier variability, quality inconsistencies from suppliers, delivery timing issues, and substitute products introduced without proper verification, and temperature failure during delivery. Your controls must address all these issues. And behavioral risk is also among the characteristics of retail and food service. Staff not following procedures when unsupervised, hygiene lapses during peak periods, allergen procedures ignored when customers are waiting. So your controls here depend on human behavior are high risk. That's why awareness and training are paramount. Let's have an overview for Class 8, operational controls. The control points, operational controls they form a backbone of a quality management system in retail and food service. So your controls must function reliably during peak service periods. Your controls must also function reliably across all shifts. And when direct supervision is unavailable, your operational control also must function reliably. Which means your system must be designed for rigorous receiving checks and temperature verification. And these must align with relevant food service requirements. Also, you must have proper storage procedures and temperature monitoring system, and also meeting relevant industry standards. And you must have a strict food preparation control for cooking, cooling, reheating, and holding temperatures. And you must have clear allergen management procedures and segregation controls. And also, you must have display and service controls, maintaining food safety during customer interaction. To control your operations. The audit focus here for your operations, certification bodies verify real-world operational performance during peak service period. So auditors focus on what happened during busy lunch, for example, or dinner rush, not during quiet preparation times. So you must be aware of that and be ready for it and design your system accordingly. Auditors observe staff behavior when managers are not present to ensure controls are embedded in practice. And this could be through direct observations, review of records, or interaction and interview. If we look at Class 9 and Class 10 performance and improvement, performance monitoring extends beyond simple metrics here in retail and food service. It requires meaningful analysis that drives systematic improvements, ensuring compliance with local legislations and industry best practices, rather than merely implementing reactive fixes to recurring issues. So we have three key indicator performance here, and those includes customer complaints, temperature deviation trends, food safety near miss, staff completion, staff training completion rates, and inspection results. Organizations must align with these relevant regulatory requirements because they are also checked during the audit. First, you must have evident requirements, and your evidence must include recorded customer complaints with thorough root cause analysis and preventive actions being implemented, and your actions must meet applicable food safety program expectations. You must also have trend analysis with a regular review of temperature excursions patterns, complaints trends, and near miss reports is crucial for identifying systematic issues and ensuring adherence to food safety standards. Trend analysis, and then you must have also systematic change. Improvement must demonstrate system change across all outlets, ensuring robust solutions rather than repeated fixes. Now, this is a comprehensive audit readiness checklist. And this checklist, again, if you follow it thoroughly, you will have all the requirements to pass stage 1 and stage 2. And this checklist is for ISO 9001, and it's a complete stage 1 and stage 2 preparations for retail and food service industry. Our checklist includes areas with class reference and stage 1 documentation requirements and stage 2 implementation evidence and auditors focus for stage 1 and stage 2. Now, if we look at the scope and context for ISO 9001, class 4.1, stage 1 requirements, you need to have context analysis, such as SWOT analysis or pistols, and quality management system process definitions. It must be documented analysis of organizational context, showing how it influences the quality management system, and define quality management system processes. That's for stage 1. And for stage 2, implementations and evidence, you need evidence that internal and external issues are regularly reviewed and staff awareness of relevant factors, including their work, record of discussions on market trends or operational challenges. The auditor focus here in both stages. Auditors will check how the organization determined relevant external and internal issues for retail and food service operations, including understanding local market trends, supplier chain specifics, and competitive landscape, for example, in New Zealand retail food and services. They will also look for evidence of how these are discussed and acted upon. For class 4.2, Stage 1 requirement, you need to have interested parties register, analysis of interested party requirements, and list of interested parties with their relevant requirements and how they are addressed. And also they must be monitored and reviewed. For stage 2, you need records of engagement with interested parties, for example, customer feedback, suppliers' reviews, and regulatory updates, and also staff knowledge of key interested parties and their requirements. Auditor focus here, they will review identification of interested parties and their relevant requirements for retail and food service operations. They will check the identification of specific, for example, New Zealand interested parties and how their requirements are met and monitored. For class 4.3, we are still in the context, scope and context. Class 4.3 requires you to have a scope statement of the quality management system with justification for exclusion. With clear and approved quality management system scope statements, and it must be current and consistent with context analysis. For stage 2, the auditor will need evidence that activities outside the defined scope are clearly defined and managed, and that staff can articulate the boundaries of the quality management system relevant to their roles, because the staff will be interviewed, and operational alignment with defined scope. The evidence auditors here will review in stage 1 and stage 2. They will review the defined boundaries and applicable of the quality management system and any justified exclusions for retail and food service operations. That's in stage 1. And in stage 2, they will confirm the scope clearly covers specific operations, or, for example, in New Zealand, they must cover retail operations across all North Island stores, North and South, or food service for all Auckland-based, for example, restaurants, if that's the scope. And for class 4.4, this class requires you to have process map showing quality management system interactions and integrated process maps showing how quality processes interact for retail and food service operations. That will be for evidence for stage 1. For stage 2 requirement, you need to prepare your staff to be able to describe their roles in quality management system processes and how their work interact with others. That means you will also brief them, but they need to have awareness and knowledge and be able to describe that without reading or without prompting. And also in stage 2, it will require operational records demonstrating adherence to defined process flows, and evidence of process effectiveness also will be required. So you need to show those evidence also for the process effectiveness. Auditors will confirm processes defined and interactions understood with retail and or food services environments and within your country's or your jurisdiction's operational environments. That's during the stage 1. During stage 2, they will check for real-time monitoring of key processes steps and any corrective actions taken to meet class 4.4. That is the scope and context covering class 4. Then if we move to class 5 for leadership, class 5.1 in stage 1, the auditors, or it will require you to have management review minutes, evidence of top management engagement, roles and responsibilities metrics, and records of management review, and clear demonstration of active top management involvement in quality management system performance, and evidence of communication of QMS importance. So you need to prepare all this for stage 1 document review. For stage 2, the auditors will need evidence for top management actively participating in quality management system activities, for example, communicating policy or allocating resources. And also that the staff can provide example of management's commitment to quality and customer feedback is consistently addressed by leadership. So those are the evidence you need for stage 2. Auditors will verify top management's commitment and leaderships in quality management system, including accountability, customer focus, and quality management system interactions. And those verifications will be conducted in stage 1. And then in stage 2, those will be conducted in stage 1 through document review. But in stage 2, the auditors will observe how top management communicates and ensure adherence to your local regulations requirements. For example, in New Zealand, they will observe how top management communicates and ensure adherence to New Zealand Food Act 2014 and Fair Trade Act of 1986 requirements. For class 5.2, in stage 1, you need evidence documents to include quality policy that must be approved by the top management, and also the approval and the dates must be during the period of the certification. And also you need approval, you need evidence of quality policy being communicated and understood by the relevant personnel. That means that policy should be included in your induction for all the staff. It should be posted in the staff area. And also it should be communicated to all the relevant parties. In stage 2, the auditor will need evidence that staff can explain the quality policy and how it relates to their daily work. Also, the auditor will need to see physically that the policy is visible and displayed in and also reinforced. And auditors also will need evidence that operational practices align with policy objectives. So in stage 1, to meet class 5.2, the auditors will review the quality policy for appropriateness and availability and communication and understanding across the organizations. So the auditors will review the documents to confirm that. And in stage 2, to meet class 5.2, the auditor will check if the policy reflects compliance with the regulations in your country. In our example, in New Zealand, must be in compliance with Food Act 2014 and customer satisfaction in New Zealand retail market. Then in class 5.3, still in leadership, and during stage 1, you need evidence or records and documents to include responsibility metric or matrices, an operational structure chart, and job descriptions and responsibilities. Wait. And responsibilities and authorities for relevant quality management system roles aligned to named individuals with evidence of communication and understanding. Those are the documentation and records that the auditor will require for stage 1. For stage 2, the auditor will need evidence that staff clearly understand their QMS roles and responsibilities, and they will need evidence of training on these responsibilities, and they will need operational procedures to reflect these assigned roles. So in stage 1, the auditors will review assigned responsibilities, review the records and documentation of assigned responsibilities, authorities, and their communication within the organizations for the quality management system. And then in stage 2, the auditor will check if responsibility align with requirements for food control plans or national programs under your country's regulations. That is class 5, leadership. Then in class 6, planning. Class 6.1, in stage 1, you need records and documents to present to the auditors. To meet class 6.1, you need risk register specific to quality management system, and opportunities register, and risk assessment methodology, and identified risk and opportunities for quality management, and documented risk assessment methodology, and action plans for addressing risks and opportunities. You need these documents and records to meet class 6.1 in stage 1. In stage 2, the auditors will need evidence that risks and opportunities are regularly reviewed and updated. They will need evidence for the implementation of actions to address risk and opportunities. And also they will interview staff for awareness of significant risk in their area. So in stage 1, the auditor will review methodology and completeness of risk and opportunities identification relevant to quality management system within retail and food service operations in stage 1 to meet class 6.1. And then in stage 2, they will check risks specific to your local customers protection laws, such as, for example, New Zealand customer protection laws. They will check evidence for food safety incidents or supply chain disruptions in New Zealand or in your local jurisdiction and how they are also mitigated. And in class 6.1.3, still in planning, for stage 1, you will need records and documents, include legal register for quality management system, and this is mandatory requirements. And you will need compliance evaluation records. You will need to address your records and documents must address all applicable New Zealand laws or your country's laws and regulations to be identified, and compliance status also must be tracked, and permit or consent must be identified and maintained. All these records are needed in stage 1, records and documents, to meet clause 6.1.3 requirements. For the same clause in stage 2, the auditor will need evidence of compliance with relevant legislations in daily operations, those legislation of your country, And the staff are aware of legal requirements also. They will need evidence for that. Legal requirements that are applicable to their roles, for example, in New Zealand, Food Act 2014 requirements and Privacy Act of 2020 requirements. And also they will need to review the records of inspection or audits from regulatory bodies. So in class 1, the auditors will review legal identification process and completeness, ensuring all relevant legislations are captured and compliance status are tracked. That's in stage 1. And then in stage 2, they will look for evidence that ensures Food Act, for example, that your regulations of your country are captured and evaluated with demonstrable compliance. For example, in New Zealand, they will need evidence that ensure Food Act 2014, Fair Trade Act of 1986, Consumer Guarantee Act of 1993, Health and Safety at Work Act of 2015, and other sector-specific regulations are captured and evaluated with demonstrable compliance. So legal register is mandatory requirement here. Then in also the class of planning, class 6.2, for stage 1, you need to have quality objectives, and this is mandatory requirement. And also you need to have records of action plans for objectives that must be documented. Measurable quality objectives must be linked to policy and significant risks, and define action plan and assign responsibilities and review schedules. So you need quality objectives, mandatory document, along with all the mentioned records in stage 1 to meet clause 6.1. And then in stage 2, you need to present evidence of progress toward quality objectives, for example, performance metrics and or project updates. And also, the staff will be reviewed or observed, or evidence will be needed to demonstrate that staff understand objectives relevant to their work and objectives are regularly communicated and reviewed. So in stage 1, the auditor will review objectives for SMART criteria. They must be specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. And also they will review the linkage to policy and significant risk within the operational context when they are reviewing your document in stage 1. And then in the stage 2, to meet clause 6.2, auditor will review objectives for relevant to your regulatory requirement for customer satisfactions. For example, in New Zealand, they will review the objectives for relevant to New Zealand customer satisfaction metrics, food safety performance, or staff training goals, and they will verify actions are being taken to meet those requirements. That is Cloud 6 planning. For Cloud 7 of ISO 9001 support, in Class 7.2, during stage 1, you need to have documents or records, including competence matrices for quality management system. You need training records, job descriptions, competence requirements must be defined for all the roles affecting quality, and training needs must be identified and addressed, and documented evidence of staff competence. Those are needed to meet class 7.2 during stage 1. In stage 2, Auditors will need evidence through observations, reviews, and records to confirm that the staff can understand competence in their assigned task, and records of the job uh, training, on the job training, and mentorship or certifications, and evidence that training is effective, for example, performance review and reduction in errors. During stage one, auditors will review competence requirements definition and evidence of competence for personal performance, for personnel performing work affecting quality management system performance relevant to retail and food service workplace or workforce. This will be during stage one to meet clause 7.2. During stage two, the auditor will check relevant to national work-safe roles or workforce roles and specific training for food handlers in your country or customer service training for consumers in your country, and the auditors may conduct an interviews with the staff to assess understanding and competence. Then in class 7.5, during stage one, you need to present to the auditor documented information procedures, including document control and record control, and document master list, and record retention schedule, and documented information being controlled, including approval and version control and distribution and access, and retention period must be defined also, and identified records must be maintained. These are requirements to meet clause 7.2 and ISO 9001 during stage one. Then during stage two, the auditor will need evidence that staff consistently use current versions of documents and records are accurately maintained and accessible, and evidence of adherence to data retentions and privacy standards is in practice. In stage one, auditor review the system for creating, updating, and controlling documented information, confirming adherence to data retention and privacy standards. And then in stage two, the auditor will check adherence to National Privacy Act. For example, in New Zealand, the auditor will check for adherence to New Zealand Privacy Act of 2020 and other relevant data protection legislation. That is class 7 requirements. Now in class 8, operations for ISO 9001 in retail and food service. Class 8.1 requirements. During stage 1 audit, you need to have documents and records, including operational control procedures, including procedures for receiving, storage, preparation, service, and dispatch. You need all these procedures, and quality plans and procedures documented for receiving inspection, storage management, preparation controls, service standards, and customer complaints handling within the operational scope. So you need these documents or records for stage 1 to meet requirement for class 8.1. Then for stage 2, to meet the same requirements for class 8.1, you need to have evidence for operational records. You need those records including temperature logs, production records, service checklists. And you need evidence that staff follow established procedures during service periods, because the staff also will be asked to do what the procedure say and what they see in the records, and it must be consistent. And you will need evidence of consistent applications of controls across shift and locations. So during stage 1, auditors will review operational controls and planning for retail and food service processes, from product realizations to delivery. They will review control for specific national supply chains and handling of national produce and local customer service protocols. And then in stage 2, they will observe operational and checks records for effective implementation. For class 9, performance evaluation, for stage 1, auditors will need records and documents for monitoring plans for quality management system and measurement procedures and analysis of data records, and performance indicators must be defined for quality, and monitoring and measurement methods defined. Analysis methods also must be defined, and records of results must be maintained. And then in stage 2, the auditors will need evidence for monitoring data consistently are collected and analyzed, and evidence of actions taken based on performance evaluation, and staff aware of performance targets and their contribution. So auditors during stage 1 will review what will be monitored, measured, analyzed, and evaluate, and how, within the specific operational context, they will review the monitoring of your national customer feedback and supplier performance in your country, or internal processes adhering to specific to your country's operations, and the analysis of these data. For class 9.2, performance evaluation, the requirements you need to submit to the auditor in stage 1 must include internal audit procedure, and this is a mandatory requirement, audit program and schedule, internal audit reports. Internal audit program must cover all ISO 9001 requirements annually, and auditor competence requirements must be defined, and auditors an audit schedule for the next 12 months, and records of audits. All this must be provided to meet clause 9.2 in stage 1. During stage 2, you will need evidence to submit to the auditor, including internal audit showing being conducted as scheduled, corrective actions from internal audits are implemented and verified, staff engagement in the internal audits processes. To meet clause 9.2 in stage 1, auditor will review the internal audit program for completeness, ensuring all aspects relevant to standards and QMS are covered, and evidence of implementation. And in stage 2, they will check all aspects relevant to national food compliance, food safety compliance, and other local standards are included in the audit scope, and that findings are also addressed. In class 9.3, during stage 1, you need to have records and documents, including management review procedures, and these mandatory requirements. You need also management review schedule and management review meeting records, and management review frequency being defined, for example, to be done annually at the minimum, and requires inputs and outputs are defined, and review is scheduled, and records of the review meetings are maintained. These are the requirements to meet Clause 9.3 in Stage 1. During Stage 2, you need to have evidence of management reviews held as scheduled with relevant inputs, and decisions and actions from review are implemented, and evidence of continuous improvement from management review. During Stage 1, auditors will review the management review process, include defined inputs and outputs relevant to operations, and evidence of reviews being conducted. Then in Stage 2, auditor will review outputs relevant to national operations, such as decisions related to national market change and regulatory update or specific local performance issues, and the effectiveness of action taken. That is Clause 9. Then in Clause 10, for improvement, for either 9001 Clause 10.2 for retail and food service, you need records and records and documents for Stage 1 to include corrective action procedure, and this is a mandatory requirement, and nonconformity and corrective action records, and corrective action processes being documented, and identifications and root cause analysis, actions, and verification systems, updates, and records of actions taken and their effectiveness. In Stage 2, you will need nonconformities. You need evidence to include nonconformities are promptly identified and recorded. Root causes analysis is conducted for significant issues. Corrective actions are implemented and their effectiveness is verified. Staff can explain the corrective action processes. During the Stage 1, auditor will review the corrective action process, ensuring effective identification of nonconformities, and root cause analysis and action implementation and verification in the operational context. In Stage 2, the auditor will check the effectiveness of corrective actions for nonconformities related to national food safety standards or customer complaints and system updates as result. Now, this is general Stage 2 specific. In Stage 1, no new documentation required beyond what links to the classes above, but all operational records must be complete and well maintained. For Stage 2, operational records and regarding operational records and monitoring data, all processes records, for example, temperature checks, cleaning logs, and batch traceability, consistently completed and accurate is a requirement, and also staff interview readiness. Staff across all levels and staff can clearly articulate their quality management system responsibilities and relevant procedures and how their work contribute to quality and customer satisfaction. In Stage 2 also, they will require evidence of implementation during service provides. They will conduct direct observations to show adherence to procedures, for example, food handling, customer service, cleaning protocols, during normal operations. And then during Stage 2 also, they will conduct real-time monitoring and corrective actions records, evidence of prompt response to incidents and nonconformities or deviations during operations with clear records of actions taken and follow-up verifications. Auditors in stage 2 will conduct extensive interview and staff and management and observe operations in various areas, in kitchen, front of the house, storage, and review records for consistency and compliance with actual practices. What happened here? I think, yep. Now, this complete audit readiness checklist, you need to have a scope statement being approved and current. You need to have quality policy being approved by the top management and understood by staff. You need to have all mandatory procedures and documented and actively implemented. You need to have legal register must be current and complete in compliance with the requirements. You need to have all objectives must be set, measurable, and actively being pursued with evidence of progress. You need internal audit program being established and fully implemented with corrective actions tracked. You need management review schedule and to be conducted with clear outputs and follow-up actions. You need competence requirements defined, training provided, and staff demonstrate understanding and capability. There shouldn't be any major gaps in documentation, and all the documented information must be controlled and current. Operational processes are consistently followed and records are maintained. You need staff across all roles and shifts to be aware of QMS requirements and their responsibilities. You need evidence of effective monitoring, measurement, analysis, and evaluation of QMS performance. All nonconformities must be addressed through a robust corrective actions. An audit must confirm all the system readiness for stage 2 in retail and food service sector, including effective implementation. Now, I'm going to show you the guide of how to pass. That was a checklist. Now it's a real work where you are going to be shown how to pass stage 1 in ISO 9001, and this is a complete pass guide. Stage 1, as we explained it earlier, is documentation readiness. Auditors will assess whether your QMS documentation is complete, logical, and ready for operations verifications. And for retailers and food service, this means proving your systems addresses customer-facing realities and not theoretical ideals. The timeline and logistics you need for stage 1, the duration, it could take 1 to 2 days depending on organizational size and scope. And location typically is conducted at head office or main site. Participants required for stage 1 include top management, QMS coordinator, and department heads. And the documents required here, you need all QMS documentation to be available for review, either digitally or physically. And what auditors will review here, hour by hour, first you have opening meeting that will last for around 30 minutes. The auditors will start by explaining the stage 1 purpose and process, and management will present the organization overview and confirm scope accuracy and any change since application. Examples in New Zealand context, You need to confirm all New Zealand locations are included in the scope. How to pass these 30 minutes? You need to ensure management is prepared to articulate the organization's overview and commitment to QMS. And you need to have the applications and any scope change clearly documented and ready for confirmation. Then you will move to scope and context review. It will take 1 to 2 hours. The auditors here will check the scope statement accuracy. Does it match the actual operations? They will check the context analysis. Have you identified customer expectations, peak service pressure, or regulatory obligations? Auditors also will check interested parties. Are, for example, your main customers identified, such as in New Zealand context, are foodstuffs and Woolworths New Zealand and local councils and customers and staff identified with their expectations. And also the process map will be checked. Does it show how receiving, storage, preparation, service, and dispatch interact? How to pass this scope and context review? First, your scope statement must describe exactly what you do, where, and for whom. Your context analysis must have been completed within the last 12 months with evidence of management review as well. And interested parties registers must show who they are and what they expect and how you address it. And for the process map, must show interaction between processes with inputs and output clearly marked. Example, in New Zealand context, we need to reference Food Act 2014, Fair Trade Act of 1986 in context. That means in your own regulations and your own country, you need to reference the applicable regulations and standards. And then we'll move to the leadership review, which will take around 1 hour in stage 1. The auditors will check the quality policy. Does it reflect actual business priorities? Is it approved, dated, and communicated to all staff? And responsibilities metrics also will be reviewed. Are roles and authorities clearly assigned? And does top management understands their QMS responsibilities? Those are what the auditors will check during the leadership review. And how to pass leadership review? First, quality policy must mention customer satisfaction, continuous improvement, and compliance. Your policy must be signed by CEO or general manager and dated within certification period. The policy must be displayed in staff areas, including and must be included in induction as well. Responsibilities metrics must show who is responsible for each QMS element, and top management can explain policy in their own words during interview. That's how you pass leadership review. And then we'll move to the planning review. That will take around 2 to 3 hours. The auditors will check here, risk register. Have you identified risk to quality, including supplier failure, staff turnover, equipment breakdown, and customer complaints? They will also review the legal register. All applicable laws must be identified. In New Zealand context, for example, all applicable laws must be identified, including Food Act 2014, Fair Trade Act 1986, Customer Guarantee Act 1993, HSWA 2015, and Privacy Act of 2020. And they will also check the objectives. Are they smart, linked to the policy and risks? And they will also check the action plans, who conducted the actions, what have they plans, when and how was it measured, the action plans and the outcomes, how to pass the planning review. Risk register must show retails and or food service specific risk with likelihood and impact and controls. Legal registers must be updated within the last 6 months, and compliance status must be tracked. And objectives are measured. For example, reduce customer complaints by 15% by December 2026 must be measurable. And each objective has action plan with named responsible person and deadline. For example, in New Zealand, the legal registers include all New Zealand Acts and MPI requirements and local council bylaws. That's how you pass the planning review stage. Then you'll move to support review. That will take also 1 to 2 hours. The auditors will check the competence. Have you defined what competence is needed for each role? They will check the training records, evidence of training being delivered. They will check document controls. How do you ensure current documents are used? And they will check records control. How long do you keep records and where? And how to pass the support review. First, competent metrics for all the roles affecting quality, including managers, supervisors, food handlers, and cleaners must be defined. And training needs must be defined as well. Training plans must exist. And document control procedures must show approval, version controls, and distribution process. And document master lists must show all controls documents with version number. And record retention schedule must be defined and should align with your local regulations and legislations. In New Zealand context, the record retention and schedule must be defined and aligned with Privacy Act of 2020 for New Zealand operations. And then you will move to operational review. That will take around 2 hours. The auditor will check operational procedure. Do you have procedures for receiving? Do you have procedure for storage, procedure for preparation, procedure for service, and procedure for dispatch? And they will check, are procedures detailed enough to ensure consistency? And they will check customer complaints handling. Is there a process to handle customer complaints? So how to pass operation review? Your procedures must exist for all the key operational mentioned in the scope. And procedures include who does it, what is done, when, how, and what records are kept. And procedures reference relevant standards. For example, temperature requirements for Food Act 2014, and customer complaints procedure showing logging, investigation, response, and closure process. Example, in New Zealand context, procedure reference New Zealand specific requirements, and you can do that in your country's requirements. That's how you pass operations review. And then we'll move to environmental performance evaluation review. That will take also between 1 to 2 hours. The auditors will check monitoring plan, what KPI do you track and how often. And they will check internal audit program. Does it cover all QMS requirements annually? They will check auditor competence, who conduct audits and are they trained. And they will check the management review. Is it scheduled? What inputs are required? Those are the things the auditor will check. And then to pass the performance and evaluation review in stage 1, you need monitoring plans to list all the KPIs, including customer satisfaction, complaints rate, on-time delivery, and product quality. Your internal audit procedures must define the process, the auditor requirements, and the reporting. Your audit schedules must show all QMS clauses cover all the 12 months, and your auditor competence must be defined, for example, completed internal audit training, and your management review procedures must list required inputs such as audit results, customer feedback, and objective progress. And management review must be scheduled minimum annually and evidence of the last review if system operating. And then you will move to improve and review. That will take you around 30 minutes. The auditors here will check corrective actions procedures. How do you handle non-conformance? And does it include root cause analysis? And how to pass this stage? This section of stage 1 for improvement review, you need corrective actions procedures to show from identifying the issue to containing the issue to investigating the root cause to implementing the actions to verifying the effectiveness and to updating the system in that sequence. And you need your procedure reference root cause analysis tools, for example, the 5 whys or Fishbone. And then you will move to the closing meeting. That will take around 30 minutes. The auditors will present the findings, either confirm readiness for stage 2 or identify gaps requiring corrective actions before stage 2. How to pass these also? Be prepared to discuss findings constructively and ask for clarification on any identified gaps, and confirm next step and timeline for stage 2 if readiness is confirmed. That's how stage 1 goes. Now the common stage 1 failure and how to avoid them. The first failure, when the scope doesn't match the reality. To fix this, you should have operation manager review scope statement for accuracy. Second type of failure is when policies are generic and not specific to your business. To fix this, your quality policy must mention your customers, your services, and your commitments. Third type of failure to avoid is when legal registers are incomplete. To fix this, you need to use government websites. For example, in New Zealand context, we can use legislations.gov.nz for the legal register and identify all the applicable laws. Fourth type of failure is when objectives are not measurable. To fix this, every objectives need a number and deadline. For example, to achieve 95% on-time delivery by June 2026. In that way, you should have smart objectives. The other type of failure to avoid is when you don't have evidence of management involvement. To fix this, your management must review and approve all key documents, including policies, objectives, and context analysis. Sixth type of failure to avoid is when procedures are too vague. To fix this, your procedures must be detailed enough that a new employee could follow them. Seventh type of failure is when internal audit programs doesn't cover all the requirements. To fix this, you need to create audit schedule showing which clauses are defined or are audited each month over 12 months. Other type of failure to avoid, the eighth type of failure, is when document control system is unclear. To fix this, Your document master list must show document's name, version, date, and location. Pre-stage 1 checklist. You can use this 2 weeks before the audit. First, all scope statements must be approved and current. Quality policy must be approved by top management, dated and displayed. Context analysis must be completed within 12 months. Interested parties register must be complete with expectations. Process maps must show all operations and interactions. Risk register must be complete with controls being identified. Legal register must be updated within 6 months. All objectives must be SMART with actions planned. Competence requirements must be defined for all the roles. Document control procedures must be documented, and document master lists must be current, and record retention schedule must be defined, and all operational procedures must be documented, and customer complaints procedure also must be documented, and monitoring plan with KPIs must be defined, and internal audit procedures must be documented, an audit schedule must cover all requirements over 12 months, and auditor competence requirements must be defined, and management review procedures must be documented, and management review must be scheduled, and corrective action procedures must be documented, and top management must be briefed and available for interview, and QMS coordinator must be prepared to navigate documentation quickly. That was the checklist. You should tick all the boxes to be 100% ready for stage 1. Stage 1 success indicators: when auditors confirm that the system is ready for stage 2, and when 0 major nonconformance is found, and when any minor nonconformance are documentation gaps only. Those can be easily fixed. And when stage 2 audit is scheduled, those are the indicators that you succeed in stage 1. So what happened after stage 1? You need to correct any identified gaps, typically 2 to 4 weeks, and submit evidence of corrective actions or corrections to auditors. And stage 2 audit will be scheduled, and typically between 4 to 8 weeks after stage 1. All right, that's the blueprint to pass stage 1. You can take notes. Everything is covered here to pass stage 1, and this is a complete guide. All right, now let's go for the guide for stage 2. This is a complete pass guide also that will lead you to certification. Stage 2 is the operational implementation audit, as we also said earlier, and auditors will verify that your documented QMS actually worked in practice during real service conditions. For retail and food service, this means auditors will observe during peak periods. They will interview frontline staffs and verify that procedures match floor reality. The timeline and logistics you need for ISO 9001 stage 2 audit. Duration, it could take between 2 to 5 days depending on organizational size, scope, and number of sites. Location, it covers all the sites within scope, head office plus operational sites. Timeline or timing, auditors will schedule during operational hours, including peak service periods. That's the timing. Participants, you need management, supervisors, and frontline staff. Those frontline staff with random selection. The access required for stage 2, they need full access to all the operational areas, records, and staff. So what auditors will do in stage 2, day by day? In day 1, the opening meeting and management interview. In the morning, the opening meeting will take around 30 minutes. The auditor will confirm audit plans and schedule. Give me a second. Then management must present any change since stage 1, and auditors will explain audit process and expectations. That is for the opening meeting. Then you move to management interview that will take between 1 to 2 hours. The auditors here will ask, typical for example, explain your quality policy in your own word. And what are your quality objectives this year and how are you tracking? And what were the results of your last management review? And what significant risks have you identified? How are you controlling them? An auditor also will ask, walk me through your process flow from receiving to customer delivery. How to pass the management interview here? First, the general manager or the CEO must be present and able to answer these questions confidently. You need to have latest management review minutes with you, including objective trackers, and risk register also must be available. And you need to speak about actual operations and not theoretical systems. For example, in New Zealand context, you need to reference actual customers like Food Staff and Woolworths in New Zealand and compliance with Food Act 2014. And then in the afternoon, in day 1, you will move to document review and record sampling. And what auditor will review here? First, they will review the internal audit reports from the last 12 months and the management review minutes. They will also review corrective actions records. Auditor will review customer complaints records, training records, calibration records, if any or if applicable, and supplier approval records, and monitoring records, including temperature logs and quality checks. Those are what the auditor will review. So how to pass this? First, your internal audit must be completed as per schedule, covering all QMS requirements. The audit reports should show findings, corrective actions, and closure evidence. Management review must have been conducted within the last 12 months with all the required inputs. And management review shows decisions made and actions assigned. And all corrective actions must have been closed with evidence of corrective actions. And customer complaints must have been logged, investigated, responded to, and closed. And training records must show who was trained, when, on what, and with competency verification. And all records must be legible, complete, and stored as per retention schedule. That's how you pass the audit stage 1 document review. Now, In the second day, it will be for operational side audit. And the auditor will start, for example, with receiving and storage. Or during receiving and storage, the auditor will observe the following. First, receiving area during actual delivery, staff checking deliveries against specific actions, temperature checks being performed, storage areas, including ambient and chill frozen, and stock rotation practices, first in, first out, or first expire, first out, and labeling and traceability. So what auditors will ask staff during receiving and storage here? For example, the auditor will ask, show me your receiving procedure. Or, what do you check when a delivery arrives? And what do you do if a delivery is out of its specification? And how do you measure first in, first out, or first expire, first out? Those are the typical questions the auditor will ask. And where do you record temperature checks also? So they will ask questions, they need answers, and they need to see evidence. How to pass here? Staff must have access to procedures. So typically, if it's physical, there should be a folder in the storekeeper office, or the procedures should be hanged somewhere accessible to them. If it's digital, it should be on the desktop. And the staff must be able to demonstrate they follow procedure without prompting. So awareness should have been completed, and the staff should have been competent to be able to articulate how they follow the procedures without reading from the procedure. And also, the receiving checks are actually performed, not just recorded. And temperature monitoring equipment is calibrated and in use. So all your monitoring equipment must have stickers with valid date on them, and calibration certificates must have been retained also. And temperature logs must be complete, accurate, and show corrective actions when limits exceeded. And a stock must be organized with clear date marking, and the staff should be able to explain first in, first out, and demonstrate it in practice. For traceability also, staff must be able to show which supplier, batch, and date for any product. Example, in New Zealand, the temperature logs show compliance with Food Act 2014 requirements. In day 2, during peak period for the operational side audit, the auditor will move to the preparation and service audit. And what auditors will observe here? They will observe food preparation during busy service period, and staff following procedures under pressure. They will observe that too. They will observe hygiene practices. The auditor will observe equipment use and maintenance. The auditor will observe quality checks during preparation, and auditor will observe service to customers. And what auditors will ask staffs here? They will ask questions such as, what quality checks do you perform during preparation? Or what do you do if equipment breaks down during service? Or how do you handle a customer complaints? Or what training have you received? To pass this, your staff must maintain hygiene practices even during peak periods. Your quality checks are performed and recorded, including temperature checks and visual inspections. And staff know what to do when things go wrong, for example, equipment failure or quality issue. And staff can explain their training and demonstrates competence, and procedures are accessible and actually used, not hidden in offices. And equipment maintenance records are available and up to date, and staff handle customer interactions professionally. And for example, in New Zealand context, staff are aware of Fair Trade Act of 1986 requirements for accurate product information. That's how you pass this stage. And then in day 3, for multi-site audit, if it's applicable for you, the auditor will check consistency of implementation across sites and communication between head office and sites, and site-specific records and monitoring, and staff competence at different locations. And how to pass this? All sites must follow the same procedures with consistent results. Site receive regular communications from head office, policy updates, and audit results for all the sites. And each site maintains required records locally, and the staff at all sites demonstrate same level of competence and understanding, and site managers can explain how they ensure consistency. For day 3 support functions audit, all right, this will be for day 3. So they will go to HR or training function audit, and auditors will ask or will check, auditor will check how competence requirements are determined, and how training needs are identified, and training delivery and effectiveness verification, and training records management. So how to pass the support function audit? The competence requirements must be documented for each role, and training needs analysis must have been conducted, for example, annually or when roles change. And training records must show who was trained, what was the training topic, when did the training take place, who was the trainer, and also assessment results. And evidence of competency verifications must be available, for example, practical assessments or supervisor sign-off. And new staff induction, including QMS awareness, evidence must be available. And then they will move to maintenance functions. And auditors will check, for example, equipment maintenance schedules, maintenance records, calibration of monitoring equipment, breakdown response procedures. And how to pass this? Maintenance schedule must exist for all the critical equipment, and maintenance records must show work completed as scheduled, and monitoring equipment, including thermometers and scales, must be calibrated to traceable standards, and calibration certificates must be available and current, and breakdown procedures must be documented, and staff have the awareness. Then they will move to, the auditor will move to purchasing or supplier management. An auditor will check supplier approval process, supplier performance monitoring, specifications for purchased products, and supplier communication. How to pass the supplier management? Approved supplier lists must exist with approval criteria. Supplier performance must be monitored, for example, delivery accuracy, quality, and timeliness. And specifications must be documented for all the critical purchase products, and evidence of supplier communications must be available, for example, specification agreements or quality requirements. For example, in New Zealand context, suppliers must be aware of New Zealand regulatory requirements. And then the auditor will move to day 4 for performance and monitoring and improvement. Performance monitoring and improvement. We'll start with the internal audit function, and the auditor will check internal audit program implementation, auditor competence, audit findings and follow-ups, and audit effectiveness. How to pass internal audit function audit. Internal audits must have been conducted as per schedule, and auditors must have completed training, for example, internal audit training course or internal auditor course. And auditors must be independent or are independent, and nobody is auditing their own work or their own department. And audit reports must show objective evidence and not opinions, and findings are followed up with corrective actions, and corrective actions are verified for effectiveness before closure. And then the audit will move to management review, and the auditor will check management review conducted as scheduled, and all required inputs are included, and decisions and actions are recorded, and follow up on previous actions. How to pass here? Management review minutes must show date, attendees, and input reviews. Required inputs must be present, such as audit results, customer feedbacks, process performance, objective progress, risk and opportunities, corrective actions, previous management review actions. And decisions must have been recorded, including, for example, resources allocation, system change, and objective updates. And actions must have been assigned with responsible person and deadline. And previous actions must have been reviewed for completion. And then the audit will move to corrective action system. The auditor will check how nonconformities are identified and recorded, root cause analysis and methodology, corrective action implementation, and effectiveness verification. How to pass? Nonconformance, you must have nonconformance register showing all the issues logged. Each nonconformance must show description, immediate action, root cause analysis, corrective action, responsible person, and deadline. The root cause analysis must be thorough, not superficial, and corrective actions must address root cause, not just symptoms. And effectiveness verification must have been conducted after implementation, for example, between 30 to 90 days later. And system updates must be made where necessary, for example, procedure change or training. And then in day 4 to day 5 in stage 2 audit, the auditor will move to customer focus and satisfaction. Start with customer feedback system. The auditor will check how customer feedback is collected, how complaints are handled, customer satisfaction monitoring, and use of customer feedback for improvement. How to pass here? Multiple feedback channels must be available, include through phone, through email, through in-person, and online. And complaints procedures must be documented and followed, and all complaints are logged with dates, customer, issue, investigation, response, and closure. And response time must meet commitments. For example, acknowledge within 24 hours and resolve within 7 days. And customer satisfaction must be measured, for example, through survey, feedback form, and repeated business rates. And customer feedback must be analyzed and used for improvement. For example, evidence in management review. And in New Zealand context, for example, complaints must be handled in accordance with Customer Guarantees Act of 1993. And then we will move to performance. For process performance monitoring, the auditors will check what KPIs are tracked, how data is collected and analyzed, trends and performance against objectives, and actions taken based on performance. Data, how to pass the process performance monitoring audit check. First, your KPIs must be defined and tracked. For example, on-time delivery, customer complaints, product quality, or waste rates. Your data must have been collected regularly and accurately, and performance are analyzed, including trends identifications or trends being identified, and compared to objectives. And actions must have been taken when performance declines. For example, evidence of corrective actions. And performance data must be presented in management review. And then in final day, for closing meeting, the auditors will present summary of the audit scope and activities, positive observations, nonconformities, if any, major or minor, and opportunities for improvement or observations, and recommendations for certification or not. So how to respond during the final day closing meeting? Listen carefully to all the findings, ask for clarification if needed, acknowledge findings professionally, don't argue, commit to corrective actions timeline, and request written report for detailed review. If we look at nonconformance classifications, for major nonconformance which prevent certification, a complete absence of a required system element, for example, no internal audit program, is a major nonconformance. And systematic failure, for example, procedures not followed across multiple areas, is also major nonconformance. And critical breakdown, for example, no control over customer complaints, is a major nonconformance, and those prevent certifications. For minor nonconformance, which requires corrective actions before the certifications, including isolated lapses, for example, one missing training records, and incomplete implementations, for example, procedure partially followed, and documentation gaps, for example, procedure exists but not updated. And for observations, examples, no action required but is recommended to take action, opportunity for improvement, for example, and best practices suggestions and potential future risks. The post-audit actions you need to follow: if zero nonconformance, you need to celebrate certification, and this is recommended, and certification will be issued within 2 to 4 weeks. And first surveillance audit will be scheduled, and typically 12 months. If minor nonconformance is found, you need to submit corrective actions plan within 30 days and provide objective evidence of corrections, and auditors will review evidence through desk or online, no site visit, and certification will be issued once evidence is accepted. And if major nonconformances are found, you need to submit corrective action plan within 30 days, and you need to implement corrections, and this may take you between 60 to 90 days. An auditor conducts follow-up audits, site visit required, and certification will be issued once major NCs are closed. The critical success factors here, the difference between pass and fail. First, staff competence and awareness. Staff must know procedures and follow them without prompting. And staff must understand why they do things, not how only. And staff must be able to explain their roles in QMS. For records integrity, records must be completed, accurate, and legible, and records must be filed out in real time and not retrospectively. And records must show corrective actions when limits are exceeded. Thirdly, you have management engagement. Management must demonstrate active involvement in QMS. Management must know their objectives, risk, and performance. And management must make decisions based on QMS data. For consistency across sites, all sites must implement procedures consistently, and all sites must maintain same records keeping standards, and all sites must demonstrate same level of competence. For evidence of implementation, the system must show evidence of learning and improvement, and corrective actions must address root causes, and performance must show positive trends. Here is a pre-stage 2 preparation checklist, and you can use this 1 week before stage 2, similar to what we did with stage 1. This checklist will prepare you to pass stage 2. First, you need to tick all the boxes, okay? This is pre-stage 2 preparation checklist, and you need to use it 1 week before the audit. First, all the staff must be briefed on audit process and expectation. Secondly, all operational areas must be clean, organized, and safe. Thirdly, all procedures must be accessible to staff, digital or physical. Fourth, all records must be up to date and complete. 5, all monitoring equipment must be calibrated and functioning. 6, all corrective actions from stage 1 must be closed with evidence. 7, management review must be completed within the last 12 months. 8, internal audits must be completed as per schedule. 9, all training records are current. 10, customer complaints records are complete and up to date. 11, supplier records are available, including approval and performance and specifications. 12, equipment maintenance records are current. 13, top management are available for interview. 14, site managers are briefed and available. 15, staff are aware they may be interviewed but not coached or answered. All right? For example, in New Zealand context, all New Zealand regulatory requirements must be evidenced, including Food Act 2014, Fair Trade Act of 1986, and Privacy Act of 2020. For stage 2 success indicators, auditors observes procedures being followed during peak periods. Staff can explain procedures and demonstrates competence. Records are complete, accurate, and show real-time completion. Management demonstrates engagement and knowledge. And system shows evidence of monitoring, analysis, and implementation, and 0 major non-conformance. And certifications is recommended. Those are the indicators. Now, for QMS excellence signals, excellence in quality management is visible in staff behavior during unsupervised period. Consistent applications across all shifts and locations, and genuine ownership of food safety and customer satisfaction. Those are the signals of QMS excellence. Staff know what to do. Staff can explain procedures without checking manual. They know the why, not just the how. And new starters receive consistent training across all locations, and complaints lead to change. Customer complaints are investigated for root causes. Systematic issues are identified and addressed, and improvements are communicated and verified across all the outlets, and consistency across shifts. Evening shifts follow the same procedures as morning shifts, and weekend staff maintain the same standards as weekday staff, and quality doesn't depend on which supervisor is present. Those are the indicators of QMS excellence that you must observe, maintain, and coach your team to achieve them. Thank you. That's stage one for QMS. We will move to part two in the next video. The same module is divided, as I said, to 4 parts. So part two, we will cover HSE. Thank you for watching, and see you in part two. This is your host, Walt Ball, founder of QHSC360.org. Bye.